Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the incredible 300-year story of the Mughal Empire. I mean, think about it. This was a dynasty founded by an exiled prince that ended up controlling about a quarter of the entire world's economy. And, of course, they left behind jaw-dropping wonders like the Taj Mahal. So the big question is, how did it all even begin? Well,
Right. The whole story of the Mughals in India, it's just packed with ambition, conquest, and just unimaginable wealth. But you gotta boil it down to the most basic question, the one that kicks everything off. Why did they even come to India in the first place?
Now, you might be thinking it was some huge planned invasion, but not really. The answer is actually much more personal. It's all about the desperate ambition of one single, young, exiled prince.
So, our story starts with this kid named Zahiruddin Muhammad, though we all know him as Babur. And let me tell you, this was no ordinary kid. He was a descendant of two of the biggest names in conquest history, Timur and Genghis Khan. Imagine this, he becomes a king at just 12 years old. But it doesn't last. His own family turns on him, conspires against him, and he's forced into exile. He loses everything.
So after years of basically wandering with no home, Babur finally gets a win. He captures Kabul in 1504 and sets up a new base of operations. But having lost one kingdom already, he wasn't just going to settle. He was determined to build a real empire. And for that, you need money. Lots of it. So his eyes turned toward the ultimate prize, India. Back then, it was famous around the world as the Sone Ki Chiriya, the Golden Bird, a land of just legendary, mind-boggling riches.
And then, just as he's thinking this, an unbelievable opportunity just falls right into his lap. See, the ruler of Delhi at the time, Ibrahim Lodi, he wasn't very popular. In fact, his own family was plotting against him. So Lodi's own uncle and the governor of Punjab send a message to Babur, an invitation basically saying, hey, why don't you come invade India and help us get rid of this guy? For Babur, this was it, the perfect opening he'd been waiting for.
And that single invitation, it sets the stage for what would become one of the most important, game-changing battles in all of Indian history. A battle that would literally change the subcontinent forever. Okay, so picture this. It's 1526 on the plains of Panipat. Babur shows up with his army, all 12,000 of them. And across the field, Ibrahim Lodi, with 100,000 soldiers and hundreds of war elephants. I mean, do the math. On paper, this is an impossible fight. A suicide mission, really.
But Babur had two things Lodi didn't: brilliant strategy and, more importantly, modern technology. He created this really clever defensive line using carts all tied together with gaps for his archers to shoot through. And here's the real kicker. He had cannons and gunpowder. This was brand new stuff for an Indian battlefield, and it was absolutely terrifying.
So when the fighting kicks off, the incredible thundering roar of Babur's cannons just completely panics Lodi's war elephants. These massive animals, which were supposed to be Lodi's biggest advantage, they just turn around in sheer terror and start trampling their own army. It was absolute chaos.
By the time the sun set, Ibrahim Lodi was dead. His massive army was crushed, and Babur was the new master of Delhi. And just like that, in the year 1526, the Mughal Empire was born.
So Babur laid the foundation, right? But it was really his descendants who took that foundation and built something extraordinary. They turned the empire into a global powerhouse and kicked off this legendary golden age of art, culture, and architecture.
Now, this whole era was really shaped by three incredible emperors. First up, you have Akbar the Great. This guy massively expanded the empire and, really importantly, came up with these new ways to govern and a policy of religious tolerance to manage all the different people in his empire. After him came his son Jahangir, and his reign is when the British first show up looking to trade. And finally, you get his grandson, Shah Jahan, who just took the empire to its absolute peak of cultural and economic power.
And just to give you a sense of the sheer power we're talking about, get this. Under Shah Jahan, Mughal India was such an economic giant that it was producing nearly a quarter of all the world's manufactured goods. European traders were just flocking to its ports for things like textiles and spices. The amount of money pouring into the treasury, it was just staggering.
And what do you do with all that cash? Well, you pour it into creating some of the most breathtaking architecture the world has ever seen. We're talking about the iconic Taj Mahal, of course the incredible Red Fort in Delhi, and the legendary jewel-covered Peacock Throne. These weren't just buildings, they were powerful symbols of an empire at the absolute top of its game. But this golden age, this incredible era of splendor, well, it was about to come to a really violent and very controversial end.
So as Shah Jahan gets older, a brutal war for the throne breaks out between his sons. Now, his favorite to take over was his son Dara Shikoh, who was more of a moderate and a scholar. But his third son, a deeply religious and totally ruthless military commander named Aurangzeb, he had other plans. He was determined to take power for himself no matter the cost.
And this conflict was absolutely savage. Aurangzeb defeats his brother Dara Shikoh in battle, captures him, and has him executed. And then, and this is just unbelievably cruel, he has his brother's severed head sent to their own father, Shah Jahan, who he'd already imprisoned in Agra Fort. With all his rivals out of the way, Aurangzeb grabs the throne for himself in 1658.
Aurangzeb's reign was a complete 180 from what came before. You remember his great-grandfather, Akbar, the one who promoted tolerance and got rid of the jizya tax on non-Muslims? Well, Aurangzeb brought it right back. His hardline policies really angered huge parts of the population, and it kicked off decades of rebellions from groups like the Marathas and the Rajputs.
Now here's the ironic thing. Aurangzeb ruled for almost 50 years, and under him the empire actually grew to its biggest size ever. But the cost was just enormous. His constant wars drained the treasury, and his policies, well, they planted the seeds for the empire's incredibly fast collapse.
So when Aurangzeb finally dies in 1707, the empire that he held together pretty much by sheer force, it just starts to crumble, almost overnight. His death created this massive power vacuum, and the whole subcontinent just descends into chaos.
What came next was just this long line of weak, pretty ineffective rulers that we now call the later Mughals. I mean, it was like a revolving door on the throne. Emperors would rule for maybe a few months, a couple of years, before getting knocked off. The central authority of the empire just completely disappeared.
And as the Mughals got weaker and weaker, other powers started rising up to fill that void. You had regional kingdoms just declaring their independence, and then there was that foreign trading power, the British India Company, who were experts at exploiting this kind of chaos to expand their own control, bit by bit.
The final blow came in 1857. After the huge Indian revolt, the British just officially abolished the empire. They exiled the very last emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, to Burma, where he died all alone, pretty much a forgotten prisoner. And with that, the 300-year-old dynasty was over.
So that leaves us with one last really big question. When you think about this whole incredible journey from the cannons at Panipat to the stunning marble of the Taj Mahal, all the way to the tragic exile of its last emperor, what is the real, lasting legacy of this 300-year empire on the culture, the politics, and the identity of India today?